Greetings from the Long Island Sound podcast. Welcome to the show. Please rate, review, and comment on the show, and call our listener line and leave a message for our guest. Dial 631-800-3579. All right, enjoy the show.
Thanks for joining us for the Long Island Sound podcast. Each week we explore new music and dive deeper with the artists and their stories behind the music. Please subscribe and rate and review us wherever you stream this podcast. Here's your host, Steve Yusko.
You are in store for an intriguing conversation that I had with Phil Firetog of the Phil Firetog Trio. They are Long Island natives who started back in 2015. And if you're a fan of John Mayer or Dave Matthews, I think you'll recognize the vibe in their music. Let's take a listen to Long Island Christmas Eve.
Travel through towns, there's silent night, the white noise we call to celebrate. In our own way, we stay and rejoice till the break of day. And the angels, well, they call out and they sing in an echoing hallelujah just for us. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Merry Christmas. It's been a while since the spirit of the season has mended what's been torn apart. And you can count on that we'll be home for a very merry Long Island Christmas. And no matter the distance, we couldn't miss this. Let's keep our tradition of a very merry Long Island Christmas Eve. To Broadway, a few in LA, some never left their small towns in Nassau. We go for days, sometimes for months, where we don't talk but we never lose touch. And we pray on this day and for peace in our time, when we can all come together and crowd around on this holy night till the morning light and fill our hearts with all the colorful sights. Merry Christmas, we're coming back home. It's been a while since the spirit of the season has mended what's been torn apart. And you can count on that we'll be home for a very merry Long Island Christmas. And no matter the distance, we could miss this. Let's keep our tradition of a very merry Long Island Christmas. Tradition of a very merry, and you can count on that we'll be home for a very merry Long Island Christmas. And no matter the distance, we could miss this. Let's keep our tradition of a very merry Long Island Christmas Eve. Christmas, and no matter the distance, we could miss this. Let's keep our tradition
The Phil Firetog Trio was formed back in 2015. It includes Phil Firetog on guitar and vocals, Johnny Potts on drums, very appropriate name, and Liam Gordon on bass. They're a band that mingles textures and layers to create music that draws their audience into an experience. And with that, I welcome Phil Firetog to the Long Island Sound. Welcome, Phil. Good to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I got to ask this. How did you first pick up an instrument and decide, yeah, I think I can do this?
Ooh. I don't know. Ever since I was like really young, my parents already like put me into music. So growing up, I started off with playing piano. My older sister was playing piano before too. So music was like a natural thing that was in the family. And then at a very young age, my parents like also put me into band at school, younger than what it would normally be. And I was playing oboe back then.
Wow.
And then, I don't know, as I grew older, like I started realizing like, oh, like it's not that cool to play oboe like at that time for me. You know, so I was like, oh, what are all the cool people doing right now? And they were all playing guitar. So then I quickly wanted to play guitar. And just with the background of, I guess, like piano and oboe, like I just wanted to, I taught myself guitar. So I don't have any actual classic training in guitar or anything further than that.
Mm-hmm. But you have the music background, so that definitely gives you a foundation.
Yeah. So there was a very basic foundation that was there, and then just basically following my ear for the rest of it, you know, to create was like the main goal. On every instrument that I played, I always wanted to just create and not necessarily play other people's stuff. Right.
I hear you. Now, when you first formed the band in 2015, how did that come about? How did you decide it was going to be a trio? And then we'll talk about your sound, which I find very unique.
Yeah. So when I started in 2015, I came out of another band that I was playing in. I was playing bass for a while in it, and I was playing guitar. That band was Page and Grace. And I transitioned into wanting to do my own music after that and really focusing on the songs that I was creating that I never brought to the table with that band. And in 2015, I went to the studio over at Voodoo Studios with Mike Watts, and we recorded 10 songs. And it was the first time that I got to do songs my way, that I wanted to do it from start to finish for every instrument. And that kind of was my business card when I was shopping around for other musicians. And I knew at that point that just coming from another band, like I didn't like the idea of always like the changing members, changing a band name or changing the image or doing that.
Sure.
So I was like, oh, let's think about this smarter. And this is all the music that I wrote. This is all the music that, you know, I wrote from start to finish. I wanted to be Phil Firetog, and I always wanted just a smaller group because I came from a band that was like, we had 5 guys in it, and it was like every decision that we had to make, it was just so like every guy had to agree, every guy had to show up to practice. It was
complicated.
5 different people's schedules. So I was like, I want the foundation to be very, very simple. And it was very interchangeable of like who could be in it, who can't. If one person left, it's still Phil Firetog Trio. And that's how the trio kind of like came about. And then I ran into my old tap student who used to follow my old band, and he reached out to me and he's like, yo, I really want to play drums for this band. I would love to, you know. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. Like, cool, let's, you know, learn these parts. Here's the 10 songs I recorded. Mm-hmm. And then that was Jake Brigaglio, and he was going up to school at UAlbany at the time.
Okay.
And he's like, yo, I have this amazing bass player that you got to meet. He's really great. He's awesome. His name's Liam Gordon. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, let's go up there. We'll have a practice. We'll meet. And we all hit it off. And we had a great time. You know, Liam's an amazing player.
Absolutely.
And Jake was awesome. Jake learned the parts start to finish perfectly. And that was the whole birth of the trio.
Wow. Now let me ask you this. How do you transition from woodshedding your instrument to saying, yeah, I think I can write some songs? Like, how does the muse hit you? What's your process? Does it vary all the time, or how'd you put the songs together?
The process totally varies. But that transition, when we were in that other band, it was a very creative process for all of us. We all loved putting in our input, and we all loved creating. It was a really cool, unique environment. The singer was mainly the songwriter too, but we all had say, and like we brought our own songs to the table, and like he would kind of merge them the way that he wanted to, or shape them and make them his own, and then we put our parts onto it. And just that creative process was so addicting, like completely addicting. And you're like, oh, I want to keep on doing this. And I would go home and keep writing my own stuff too. So I had like a whole catalog of things that I was sitting on. But when that band dispersed, it was like I wanted to keep on going, and there wasn't anyone else there. Everyone was gone. So it was like, oh, what do I do now? I was like, I still want to do this. So the only way to keep on doing it in the way that I wanted to do it was to just do my own thing.
Sure. What I found interesting, when you get a group and you find that collaborative chemistry, and sometimes it takes a while to figure out personalities and input and not be thin-skinned about things and kind of roll with it. But once you find that magic, it's really something you want to hang on to. So I can appreciate where you want to take control of that to a certain degree and keep it somewhat pure and not make it 15 people trying to give input on one song, which could be totally disastrous,
Well, we saw firsthand from that. There was just too many cooks in the kitchen. As fun and creative as it was just like, we started bickering over like literally all the small things that were in there. Like, oh, well, that song wasn't that great because of that bass lick, or that song wasn't that great because, you shouldn't have played the guitar that way. So with that in mind, I came into the project where I was just like, listen, like, I'm open to all suggestions. Like, it's not just like the Phil Firetog show.
Right.
Like, I don't want it to be that. Like, I do love the collaboration, but it was just, I wanted my say on, what's the final decision here? Like, something I really don't like that, let's change it. Is there another option that we can do? Is there something better? Because at the end of the day, I didn't want to point fingers at people and be like, well, this isn't good because of you guys.
Sure.
Like, this didn't work out because of my decision. I'm sorry.
Right.
Like, it's a lot easier to take the blame and not have to hold a grudge later on at other people for a stupid mistake that isn't their fault,
Yeah. And, nothing's perfect. And what's interesting, somebody's got to take charge and make the decisions. You can get 5 creatives in a room and they'd have a great time and never come up with anything. I mean, that's just the reality of things. So having a good chemistry of different people can really affect your productivity and your creativity, at the same time. So I want to switch gears for a moment. So where's hometown for you, if you don't mind saying?
Hometown is Farmingdale.
Okay.
Farmingdale, New York. Yeah.
I'm a Bethpage guy, so we're
neighbors.
We're neighbors, and Farmingdale has just become like a new hub of nightlife for sure. At least.
Oh, absolutely! It's changed completely.
At least it's almost like competing with Patchogue, I think. So.
Yeah. Well, that's where I was living before too. Like I float around. I grew up in Farmingdale, lived over in Massapequa, then Huntington, then Patchogue. And now I'm back here in Farmingdale.
Gotcha. So now, do you put the tracks together in a home studio and then go to a studio to have it mixed, or what's your process with that?
Occasionally we do that. I would say for the most part not, though. It's more, the songs are pretty much written guitar with vocal and then brought to the other guys, and then we start workshopping them, saying what we like, what we don't like about it. And in that group, we start, creating little more individualized meetings that we'll have. And then, like, one time I'll just meet with just the drummer and we'll work on, I'll meet with Johnny and we'll just work on drums and get it perfect to the framework of what we want. Then we'll do the same thing with bass, bring it in. And it's kind of just built on each session, I guess.
Gotcha.
But we don't get a chance to really record them, listen back and everything until we go to the studio. The studio is where we have our idea, we lay everything down, we hear it back, and then we make the changes on the spot.
Now, do you send it to somebody to mix it down for you, or are you guys doing all the work at that point?
We normally go to Voodoo Studios.
Which is based, I'm not familiar, where are they based out of?
So they're Port Jefferson.
Okay, gotcha.
And Mike is the producer, owner of the studio. And we sit with him and his engineer, Frank, who also produces as well. So Mike and Frank will be in our session, and they'll be with us, you know, workshopping ideas, auditioning parts for stuff, and seeing which one works better. And yeah, it really is brought to life there at the studio.
Gotcha. Now, our audience heard Long Island Christmas Eve. Tell me how that came about.
That song was, I was sitting on that one for a little bit, and that is my personal experience for Christmas Eve. And I have a group of friends that will gather from wherever we are. We always come back home. They would be in school. They come back. Now they live wherever they live, and they come back to see their family here on Long Island. And it was a little tradition that we had, that we met at a diner on Christmas Eve. So at midnight on Christmas Eve, we always met up.
Wow.
We always just hung out. We had like a little, our own little party. We go to the diner afterwards. We go out for drinks and everything. And it's just something that we've been doing for years. And that was something that I always wanted to do, a Christmas song. And I always struggled to be like, well, what am I writing a Christmas song about? What is this going to be about? You know, am I going to be talking about Santa? Am I going to be talking about Frosty? Like,
right.
What's the topic here? And that was the one that felt like the most true to me. So I wanted to write something that I was very connected to for it. And that's the story.
Nice. So why don't we do this? Let's take a quick break. And I have a guess on who some of your influences might be. Okay. I'm not going to say now. We'll leave that as a mystery. And when we come back from the break, we'll see if I was on target or not. Stick with us, everybody.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back with Phil Firetog. At the Long Island Sound, we're much more than a podcast. We're building a community. Please go to gigdestiny.com. Check out all our social media links. Subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Please comment. Call the listener line. Tell us what you think, what questions we should ask, who we should have on the show. And most of all, we thank you for your generous support. And remember, support the artists who are guests on the show. Now back to the podcast. Okay, we're back with Phil Firetog, and I have this guest. And if you listen to Phil's band and music, it jumps right, at least it jumps right out of me. So I'm going to guess one of your influences was Dave Matthews. Am I correct?
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
All right. What other
Dave is,
what other guys as well? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no problem. I think one of the main influences, though, for me, and to getting into writing and to getting into the way that I wanted to play, was originally John Mayer.
Okay.
John Mayer was like that first pop mainstream acoustic player, and I always loved acoustic guitar, the tonality, the texture, everything about it, and hearing that someone was able to make something so popular at the time, that was a huge influence for me. And then on top of it, I mean, he's just an amazing player. Mm-hmm. But so he was a huge influence for just playing acoustic guitar. Rob Thomas and Matchbox 20 was another huge inspiration for songwriting. Mm-hmm. Dave Matthews, huge inspiration for just overall sound and production. And then for the style of guitar that I play with my effects and everything that I do on a technical end is John Butler Trio, or just John Butler. The way that he plays guitar, he does like a split signal. Half the guitar goes into an effects board. The other half goes just DI acoustic, and it's all mixed and blended from there.
Oh, interesting. What I really enjoyed was adding the wind instruments. Well, first let me reel it back a little bit. One, I see Phil Firetog Trio, and then I see like 5 guys in one of the pictures. I'm like, well, how did that happen? But then I noticed, I think he had a flute player and a sax player, and I really appreciate the adding of the wind instruments because it just brings a whole different texture to a song and really,
absolutely,
really brings it out. And I'll just give a reference to, there's a guy named Tony Tobias, who's from Huntington. He's originally from South Africa. And he ran into a group of guys from Oceanside, and they brought with them a horn section. And man, let me tell you, it really affected his music in such a positive way. It was really enjoyable to see him play live.
Nice. Yeah, those instruments just add a whole different level of texture, they paint a totally different picture in it. And like, it makes the songs feel a little bit more through composed. And there's just a lot more detail that's in there that can take you on a totally different journey.
So the question I have for you is, when you put that arrangement together in the studio, how is it to go and play live now and try to replicate that?
There's definitely strengths and weaknesses about it. The weakness is that it never sounds the same. It will never sound the same as the recording, and I think that's one thing that I really enjoy. And surprisingly, I think that's also the strength, because every time that we play it, I allow the guys, or it allows the guys, I don't allow it. It allows the guys more creative freedom and to really feel what they want to feel as musicians. And a lot of those guys that are the woodwind players and horn players are all jazz musicians.
Right.
You know, they're not the garage band type guys. They weren't the guys that were in high school playing in the band with, you know, with the bass and guitar and drums. And they have a totally different creative mindset. And it's fun to watch that, and it's fun to like immerse myself in that, because it's totally different. But they go in with all this different feeling every time that they're playing it, and it's really fun. And it's a totally different show every time that we play. It's a totally different vibe, and it's the vibe of what we're feeling for that night, and it's awesome.
Nice. You know, it's interesting. I remember talking to my friend Steve Martino, and he mentioned that, you know, Tony Bennett doesn't sing any particular song the same way all the time. He has those nuances and the feel, and I would think he taps into emotion to kind of play in that. And then when you're playing live, you know, you have that yin and yang between the audience, and you're getting a vibe from the audience for sure, positive or negative.
Absolutely.
You're getting a vibe. So now I would assume that your fellow bandmates now have that freedom to kind of run with it, which can make for an exciting show, I would think. You know?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, like, we play shows, and I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, every show that we play is sold out. No, definitely not. You know, like, we play like bars where like 2 people showed up for the night, you know, and it's like, oh man, this kind of sucks, but like, we kind of like it too, because at that point, anything goes. We just play for the sake of playing, and we have fun, and we try out things that we shouldn't be trying out at a show, and it's awesome. You know, and then we have these other big shows where it's the energy is just so much, and we play closer and safer to the book of how the song's supposed to be, but some other magic happens there where it's like we're playing it, but we're feeling something a little different, and like every show is just different, and it's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, now you're sticking, as far as the clubs and the venues you play at, do you stick pretty much to the Long Island music scene, or have you branched out from there?
Last February we did a little mini tour, and we actually went around to, where did we go? We went down to Virginia. We went to Richmond. We went to South Carolina. From South Carolina over to New Orleans. New Orleans to Tennessee. Tennessee back to North Carolina. North Carolina to D.C. And then Maryland, and then we were home.
Wow!
And we traveled around, and that was awesome. Like, seeing the way that the music resonated in the different areas and for different people. It was great, and it was definitely exciting. But for the most part during the year, we're pretty much Long Island based for music, just because of everyone, like, their work and what they do for a living too. Like, just keeps us here. We don't have that much time to travel. But the shows that we play are mainly like restaurants. We do a lot of, we try to stick away from doing full on bars. We'd rather be playing venues than bars. And some nonprofit organizations too, any events that they do.
Right. Anything for exposure. I found the singer-songwriters and bands that I've spoken to over this past year, of the very successful ones, they've all given back to the community and have played a charity or some event. And I tell you, the goodwill of the stories that I've heard, you know, really comes back in spades, because you never know who gets exposed to your music and then pulls you in another direction or another venue and say, hey, I really grooved with those guys, and they would fit in, you know, perfectly, you know, here or there. So I'm glad to hear that you're doing that. So I would assume the summer months are the real time that you can hit the road and go out there and do it. But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. How did the quarantine affect you guys? One, two places. One, as a band, okay, and we're all, we're locked up, and two, creatively, in a positive or a negative way.
In a really messed up way, it was completely positive for us. We enjoyed every moment of it. Besides when it got really, really bad, where we just didn't want it, like we were really safe about our families and not trying to meet up and do things like that. That made it a little bit harder. But as far as playing out, like it actually enhanced our playing out. Restaurants really wanted to get back in the groove so fast that places were looking for music at the time, and we were playing almost every weekend. It felt like when restaurants finally opened up, we were playing every weekend, and we're playing so much. So we got so much playing exposure with one another as musicians, also just being out. So that was a really great thing. And then creatively, on a non-music level, it made us think like, what are we going to do? How are we going to promote? How can we manage our time? And what are we doing as far as like merchandise and things to really, as a business, we had to think about how can we bring in money without just playing music,
right,
and touring or doing, typical shows. So that was a really cool creative process that we had. And one of those ideas was to start playing restaurants. Restaurants were offering us more money than we were getting at bars for going out for a 45-minute show, and now we're playing 3-hour shows.
Right. It was interesting, especially during COVID. There was a time I was at I'll never forget this. I was at Lily Flanagan's in Babylon, and I remember seeing a Caribbean band, and it was two people with a third person, and they kept rotating that third person in and out, so there would only be two people at a time because the bar was restricting it to a duo. So duos and trios were more apt to get some business when things started loosening up. So it was pretty interesting how that came about. And then I recently, I'm trying to remember the place. There's a place in Amityville. It's a great restaurant. He's a real promoter of the arts. It's like an Italian restaurant. It'll come to me. I'll put it in the chapter marks. It's really good, and I think would be a good fit for you guys. And I just recently went to another place in Bayshore called Fire Island Vines, which is a wine bar / craft beer restaurant. Angelo is a great promoter of local musicians. And
that place sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I never heard of it.
Yeah. They opened up just before COVID, and they survived. And what's interesting with doing a plug for Angelo here is he closes at 10 o'clock at night, even on the weekends. So he doesn't want the
crazy
drunken bar crowd,
the rowdy
crowd. He has a certain audience that he's looking for, and he's really looking for the 20-somethings through the 60-somethings. People drink and spend money and want to hear original music plus covers. Of course, you got to move in. But anyway, big plug for Angelo. He's a pretty cool guy. Hey, I want to talk about this. Let's talk about the song "Fall" that we're going to play next for our audience. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll let the audience listen to it.
Yeah, so Fall was this different kind of project for me to take on. It was a very weird tuning on the guitar, this more finger-picking style, very light. And the story behind Fall is the feeling of falling in love again, and how we're so cautious about jumping and diving right into it, and being afraid from all the past experiences of what can possibly go wrong before they actually do. It's just this fear that you have every single time, because every time we fall in love and then love ends, it's like we're jaded, we don't want it, we become more bitter. And it just keeps on going through this process. So the more times that you fall in love, the more bitter you are in the end.
Right.
And that's pretty much the whole idea of the song.
All right. So let's get a listen to "Fall." We'll be right back after the song. Check it out, everyone.
Lift me up love, don't ever let me fall. Lift me up, love, don't ever let me fall. 'Cause if I fall, I will be shattered. Oh, pick up the pieces on the floor. And if I dive, I'm diving all in. Oh, I don't know how long I can hold my breath for. And you said you would have. Get yourself lost in this and surrender. But you knew it, oh, we knew it before you fell right. Just tell me something is better than nothing as you're waiting and waiting. I'm waiting for me to give. Oh, tell me something. It's better than nothing. Oh, this feeling of falling, this fear of fall. Lift me up, love. Don't ever let me fall. Lift me up, love. Don't ever let me fall. 'Cause if I fall into your wonderland, oh, I tumble down that rabbit hole. And if I dive, I'm diving all in. Oh, I don't know why I bother coming up for air anymore. I said I would have crack open for let my walls break down. And I knew it, oh, you knew it. We felt it in our bones. Just tell me something. Is it better than nothing as you're waiting and waiting? I'm waiting for me to give. Oh, tell me something. It's better than nothing. Oh, this feeling of falling, this fear of fall. We said we would crack open for let our walls break down. But you knew it, oh, we knew it. We felt it in our bones. And we said we wouldn't get ourselves lost in this and surrender. But you knew it, oh, we knew it before we fell right. Lift me up, love. Don't ever let me fall. Lift me up, love. Don't ever let me fall.
Great song. Really appreciate you bringing that to the table. So what do you got coming up? It's very interesting that you did that whole travel, through a few states. What do you got?
So our approach for this next year is we have a bunch of songs that we're going to be releasing sporadically through it. I think every 2 months we're going to be doing a new single, and a new single is going to drop. So we got, I believe, like 5 more singles that we're going to be releasing. All different songs, all different energy for each one of those releases.
Yeah, what's I find interesting, and you're talking to an old man who's 61 here, who was used to diving into an album and playing it till the needle wore out, on my phonograph. And now the trend seems to be EPs, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 songs at the most, but kind of like making ice cream cones to get it out into the market as onesie twosies, keeping the expectation for your audience alive, I guess. It's an interesting trend.
Yeah, I feel like it's like trying to keep a relevance, and it's always playing catch up. I love the concept of albums, and I love the idea that this is a collection of songs that could take you onto its own journey, and it has its own theme that's wrapped in. But from that business end, from that marketing end, I truly feel like releasing individual singles keeps us busy. It keeps audiences more engaged. And I just feel like it's not, if I released an album this month, let's say I released, well, not this month because it's
right.
Christmas.
Nobody releases anything now, right?
if I release an album, that even if it's an EP or a full length, there's 5 songs or it's 10 songs, I feel like it's almost wasted. Because even when bands did it back in the day, you look at it and you're like, well, how many singles did they really have off that one album before the next one came? And it's like, well, only 2 songs were great that you remember. It was the staple of the album. And I feel like all the other songs kind of get lost in the mix, and it's not making each one of those songs, which in its own is an artwork, each one of those artworks is not getting the recognition that it fully deserves.
Right. It's like when you give birth to that third child, you don't have as many photographs of that kid, because you're tired.
Yeah. And you have less worries, and you're like, just do whatever you want.
That was probably the weirdest
you're not
analogy
hovering.
I've come up in a long time. It's also, what's interesting too now with artists is you really, and that's the approach that I took with the Long Island Sound podcast. I always had a curiosity. One, I love seeing live music. As I get older, I like a tribute band now and then that'll reminisce about an artist I like. But now I find out I'm getting exposed to so much music that's right around the corner from me in my own backyard that I never would have known about. And the position I took here is, I've always had that curiosity. What's that guy's story? What's that gal's story? What drove them to write, to sing, to put themselves out there? So I go in as a curiosity seeker. And now what I see with bands and artists is you have to have a lot of things in your tool belt to, let's say, stay relevant, putting out EPs and putting out singles the way you're doing it. But then you have to have this social media aspect of things that you have to work, and, we've got busy lives. It's not so easy to do that. So, by the way, you have a great website, and I'm just going to remind the audience that take a look when you're not driving and listening to the podcast. You'll see chapter marks, and you'll have the Spotify list for the Phil Firetog Trio, as well as their website, so you can see events and what have you there. But it's interesting, how you have to approach this. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'm asking you because there's nobody else in the room with me right now.
Okay.
Social media and
social media. Yeah, no, social media. It is a full-time job. It's always catching up, and it's like, oh, what's the new one that's out? What are we doing now? What's the trend? What are we? How do we make our own trend? How are people going to see us? It's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing tool to use. It is free advertising. It's something that we didn't have before. The amount that we can reach is awesome, but it's okay. I reached all these people, but how am I supposed to now engage with these people? And that becomes its own new problem that we all have to solve.
Yeah, together, I think you touched on it earlier. Where let's be honest. Even the very popular singer-songwriters are not making money on Spotify. They'll get a check for $1.42, every couple of months if they're streaming tens of thousands. So where else you got to go? You got to go with merch, and you got to go with touring and doing the gigging.
I mean, you have to go with publishing. You need to go with placement of your song, commercials, as it always was. Netflix is a great thing. Amazon Prime, not just the music end of Amazon Prime, but the videos and the movies that they put out. If you get one of your songs in one of those films, I mean, that's where now you're making more money than you would even off the plays that you're getting on Spotify, which, it never was really like that. Record sales were the base income of what a musician was making.
Now I'll tell you something. I just found this out from the Como brothers. Because of the competition between YouTube and YouTube Reels and TikTok, YouTube is actually paying them to do Reels because of their popularity. They're throwing them some dough, which is just kind of interesting. I would never have figured that would happen.
As long as you're an influencer at that point. Every new technology or new social platform is really looking for those influencers, people that have a following, that they're like, oh, this is going to be a trend now. This is what we're all doing. YouTube wants that. And I mean, you can't blame them. It's something else that's pulling people from watching and being on YouTube. More people are on TikTok all day just scrolling. I mean, when I go on it too, I don't even watch a full video. I scroll too, so my attention span's not even being captured
they say
either.
if you get somebody to listen more than 7 seconds, you're pretty good at it. So, and I'm not going to take my clothes off. So I'm just telling you, there's some things I just won't do, and some things people don't want me to do anymore. So that's one of the things. Hey, let's talk about Circles, the song you brought. How did that come about? Let's have the audience take a listen to it.
So Circles was part of the album that we called Circles. It was the first album that the trio, as a trio, worked on. The first one that Liam was on, Jake Bragaglia was on it as well. And it was the album as a whole was a development of our sound and what we were trying to accomplish. We also went in with this mindset, which looking back on, like I wish we did it a little differently, but we executed what we wanted. We wanted to do as raw as we can possibly do it. So meaning like if you listen to it, that's exactly how it sounds live. I think the only difference that we did was we added harmonies on the tracks. And there was no extra guitars or instruments that were added onto this whole album. And it came out great. And it definitely had the sound that we wanted, and we captured it the way that it was. And then like talking about albums like we were before, this one, we went in with the concept of the title song was Circles, but we also wanted the album to have this, without being so apparent, it actually has elements in each song that are repeated. If it's musically or lyrically, I think mainly it might have been lyrically with like certain words that were repeated from other songs or past songs.
Oh, very interesting. All right, let's let everybody listen to Circle. Be right back after the tune. Check it out. Hey, everybody, we're back with Phil. And Phil, I got to tell you I'm really disappointed in something. And to give full disclosure, Liam Gordon, your bass player, actually played bass for a church group that I was in. He was too good, played too loud, okay? Why he isn't on the podcast, I don't know. Maybe he's afraid of microphones. I mean, great bass player, but, you know, you turn the mic off. I mean, you may want to put it in front of him just for shits and giggles, but no, I'm kidding. Just doing that to see if Mr. Liam Gordon is listening to the podcast.
Yeah, you'll see if you get a text message.
Right, I won't get a phone call because he's too young, because nobody calls anymore. He'll just send me something in all caps. So shout out to you, Liam. Good to see that you're part of this trio. And hey, you know what? I really had a good time chatting with you. Thanks for bringing me that Christmas song. It's so very timely to get this out right at Christmas. And you know who you know, and you know the Como brothers and some of the things we discussed offline. We really have to support local artists here on Long Island. We do that here at the Long Island Sound Podcast. So, hey, when you're out seeing groups like the Phil Firetog Trio, hey, put something in the tip jar, will you? Venmo them some PayPal money or whatever. Anyway, but it was really good to have you on the program. I wish you happy holidays.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I wish you the same.
I look forward to seeing you guys live and enjoying your music. So until next time. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the time you spent with us. Please subscribe and comment and visit us at gigdestiny.com. Till next time, be generous with your joy, keep your spirits high, and let the music take you on a journey. Be well. Peace. Thanks so much for listening. Please rate, review, and comment on the show. We really love to hear from you. And call our listener line at 631-800-3579. Again, thanks so much. Be well.